September 30th, and so we'll be watching for that today. There are several hearings also happening this week up on Capitol Hill. General Petraeus is before the Senate Armed Services Committee right now, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. It began. We're covering it live on C3. We're also covering Secretary Geithner, who will be live coverage on cspan.org. Now to the House.
Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., March 15, 2011. I hereby appoint the Honorable Michael R. Turner to act as Speaker Pro Tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 5, 2011, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the greatest threat to our democracy is unemployment. We all know the numbers. We all have far too many constituents who don't have jobs and can't provide for their families. Too many Americans are without work, and more of them are losing hope. Unemployment benefits are running out. Fear is creeping in. But for some of the unemployed, their tireless job search has been coming up empty because some employers won't even consider them for openings. Recently, the New York Times reported that one employer listed a job that included the caveat, quote, "No unemployed candidate will be considered at all," unquote, and that a Texas electronics company said that it won't, quote, "consider, review anyone not currently employed regardless of the reason," unquote. It is reminiscent of a time when signs read, "Blacks need not apply," or "Women need not apply." Mr. Speaker, I think it's high time that we fix that. How are the unemployed supposed to find work if they don't even get considered for a job? How do we expect the unemployment rate to go down when the unemployed aren't even available or allowed to compete for a job? Along with Congressman John Lewis, I'm introducing legislation that will amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to make it illegal for employers to discriminate against applicants because they are currently or were currently unemployed. The Civil Rights Act of 2011 will not give a job to those who are unemployed, but it will give those who are unemployed through no fault of their own the opportunity to compete for a job on the merits of their ability. Mr. Speaker, we talk in pleasantries and political correctness about, quote, "these difficult economic times." We debate policy and hold hearings on how to move America forward. But recently, the Bureau of Labor Statistics had to modify its current population survey to be able to include responses reporting a duration of unemployment over 2 years. We are making room for the reality of chronic unemployment in America in very real ways while promising it will get better. I think we need to do more to make sure that people have opportunities. Nearly 9% of Americans right now are unemployed. That's 13.9 million Americans that we represent as members of Congress who are looking for the opportunity to pursue the American dream. They are looking for Washington and to Washington for leadership and to keep things from getting any worse. They are writing our offices, begging us to help them jumpstart America. They are not just looking for a handout, they're looking for a way out, just a chance so that they can take care of the rest. They're hoping that the next interview will mean a new start. Mr. Speaker, the job market is troublesome, but we cannot allow companies to arbitrarily pick who will come out of the economic crisis by disqualifying unemployed workers. It should not be their right to discriminate this way. We as a nation face triumphs and challenges together. It seems to me that to allow such a practice is counterintuitive to everything that Congress is working towards. Why create jobs if those Americans currently without jobs are not eligible? Just because an individual was unlucky to be laid off or had the misfortune to graduate into a jobless market does not mean that we should just cast them aside. This unemployment practice adds insult to injury for Americans who are desperately looking for jobs, for college graduates who debate if their education was worth the cost, for families who are trying to make more on less. Those who live on Main Street of America had very little to do with the onset of our economic crisis. In response, they're doing what generations before us have taught, carrying on, hoping that the darkness will give way to light. Mr. Speaker, if we allow employers to block consideration for those who are unemployed, we let that light get a little dimmer. We allow the American dream to be tarnished. We send a message to the American people, those who are currently unemployed and those who want a bad break away from unemployment, that we will bail out banks but not support them as they fight to take care of their families. The Civil Rights Act and the amendments that have followed demonstrate what makes America exceptional. Here, regardless of the color of your skin, the God you pray to, your ethnicity, your age or sex. You will be judged on your performance. We haven't always lived up to our principles, but it is the collective momentum towards these values that make America great. Discrimination against any American is an affront to the very idea of America. A new class of citizens now needs protection from the superficial bias that is not based on the ability to perform. Using current employment status as a requirement for application or consideration is shameful. 13.9 million Americans currently unemployed. That means 13.9 million Americans are considered by some employers to be no longer viable for employment. They are dismissed out of hand. But, Mr. Speaker, I refuse to believe that every unemployed individual is unqualified for a job. It is an arbitrary way of narrowing an applicant pool by finding a loophole that allows discrimination. I ask each and every member of Congress to stand with me and to say to those 13.9 million Americans who are unemployed, you are not forgotten. Your chance has not passed. We should pass the Civil Rights Act of 2011. We should not allow the opportunities that all Americans deserve to be taken away. Current joblessness should not disqualify you from employment. Your ability is more valuable than any label ever placed upon you. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Ross-Layton, for 5 minutes.
I thank the Speaker for the time. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize and support the efforts underway throughout my wonderful state of Florida to honor the courage, the achievement, and the legacy of Cuban Americans in the United States. The following cities, in addition to the Florida House of Representatives, have passed resolutions in support of designating a day to recognize the many valuable contributions of Cuban Americans to the United States. Hialeah Gardens, Hialeah, Doral, Florida City, West Miami, Miami Beach, the City of Miami, Pembroke Pines, Homestead, and Key West. Cuban Americans have had a profound and lasting influence on the history, values, and culture of the United States since the arrival of the earliest Cuban settlers more than 400 years ago in St. Augustine, Florida. According to the 2007 Census survey, 251,000 Cuban American-owned businesses generated $51 billion to our economy. Several local South Florida municipalities have recognized the important contributions that the Cuban American community has made to the economic and cultural development of our great nation. Cuban Americans have become dedicated public servants, having held posts at the highest levels of government. Cubans settling in the United States look at this nation, our wonderful United States of America, with gratitude, and many have risked life and limb to defend this bastion of freedom and democracy. Countless Cuban Americans have served bravely in all branches of the United States Armed Forces and have fought honorably in many wars. One such hero is Armando Alejandre, who voluntarily enlisted in the United States Marine Corps and served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. Armando was also a volunteer for the Brothers to the Rescue, a pro-democracy organization whose mission is to promote and support the efforts of the people of Cuba to free themselves from the Cuban dictatorship through the use of active nonviolence. While he and his fellow Brothers to the Rescue volunteers were carrying out such a humanitarian mission, on February 24, 1996, the Cuban regime ordered Cuban military jets to shoot down their unarmed civilian aircrafts. The shoot-down resulted in the unjust killings of Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandre, Mario de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. Last month, I wrote a letter to Secretary Clinton and Attorney General Holder asking the administration to take immediate action to indict Fidel and Raul Castro for their role in this horrible shoot-down. The United States must make it clear that we will not stand for the Cuban tyranny's manipulation and unapologetic crimes against the American people, nor for its abuses against its own people of Cuba. No matter how the regime and its enablers try to spin it, the Cuban tyranny remains as oppressive and uncompromising as ever. Its methodical release and exile of political prisoners is nothing but an attempt to curry favor with those with whom the regime seeks business. And this weekend's conviction and sentencing of U.S. citizen Alan Gross to 15 years in prison is a clear reminder of this. This deplorable act is another illustration of the regime's willingness to use human beings as political pawns to advance its destructive agenda. The United States and all responsible nations must demand the immediate release of Alan Gross and all prisoners who remain wrongfully imprisoned in Castro's gulags. I am proud to say that despite the challenges and the passing years, Cuban Americans remain undeterred in our fight for freedom, justice, and democracy. Mr. Speaker, I join in the support of these resolutions and again urge that a date be set to honor the courage, the achievements, and the legacy of Cuban Americans in the glorious United States. Thank you very much for the time, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Colstrip, Montana is home to the second largest coal plant west of the Mississippi. One boxcar full of coal is burned every 5 minutes. The burning coal creates sodium, thallium, mercury, boron, aluminum, and arsenic, which is pumped out of the factory and into the air. The chemicals that aren't pumped into the air are caught in the factory's scrubbers and then dumped with coal ash into giant settling ponds. These ponds are shallow, artificial lakes of concentrated toxicity which leach this poison into wells and aquifers. The sludge flows into the surrounding towns and countryside, bubbling up against foundations and floorings, cracking the floor in Colstrip's local grocery store. Ranchers in eastern Montana are now suing the plant for damages. Noxious water, they cite, is the only liquid that fills their wells and stock ponds. James Hansen, a renowned climate scientist, says Colstrip itself will cause the extinction of 400 species. But Colstrip burns on. Why? Because we have no national energy plan, and because there are currently no federal enforceable regulations specific to coal ash. This lack of federally enforceable safeguards is exactly what led to the disaster in Tennessee, where a dam holding more than 1 billion gallons of toxic coal ash failed. The TVA disaster destroyed 300 acres, dozens of homes, killed fish and other wildlife, and poisoned the Emory and Clinch rivers. From Tennessee to Montana and across the nation, the story is the same. We have no national conservation plan, no national energy policy, no regulatory enforcement authority. What's worse today, we're faced with a bill, H.R. 910, the Energy Tax Prevention Act, which purports to protect citizens from taxation. In reality, this bill is a death sentence, not only to our land, air, water, animals, and plants, but to humans. This bill overturns proven scientific findings that carbon pollution endangers the health of Americans. It repeals the greenhouse gas reporting rule and removes the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to require energy efficiency at power plants and refineries. This bill simply says that science doesn't matter. I stand here today to refute that claim and further to protect the integrity of science. It is this science, these facts and figures, that have led hundreds of scientists to confirm that global warming is real. In fact, over 200 peer-reviewed scientific studies have found that global warming is real and that man contributes to it. To this date, 0 peer-reviewed studies have found otherwise. It is this science that led the Supreme Court to rule that Environmental Protection Agency does, in fact, have the authority to regulate greenhouse gases. And it is this science that led the Congress to pass the Clean Air Act, the act which designated the EPA as the body charged with overseeing, adapting, and implementing these regulations. In the coming months, EPA will begin regulating greenhouse gases from certain emitters for the first time. These regulations have become hugely controversial and, sadly, political. These rules seek to combat man-made climate change. Man-made climate change that is melting our polar ice caps, that is raising the level of our oceans, and that is modifying our seasonal temperatures. Man-made climate change that is altering the duration of our growing season, that is flooding part of the world and causing multi-year droughts in others. Man-made climate change that is allowing particulate matters to infiltrate our children's lungs, making them suffer from lifelong asthma and making us die earlier. And still here we are, ignoring cries from health and medical professionals who have asked us as members of this body to fulfill the promise of clean, healthy air for all Americans to breathe. Support full implementation of the Clean Air Act and resist any efforts to weaken, delay, or block progress toward a healthier future for all Americans. ignoring requests from former senior military officials who wrote just last week, quote, America's dependence on oil constitutes a clear and present danger to the security and welfare of the United States, and that, as former senior military officials, we are concerned about congressional efforts to undermine the Environmental Protection Agency's regulatory authority that is critical to reducing our dependence on oil. Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford the cost of Energy Tax Prevention Act, lost and devastated ecosystems, lost jobs, and lost lives. Thank you, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Walberg, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me cut to the point. Gas prices have skyrocketed at the worst possible time. The economy is in a slump and people are hurting. The administration and congressional Democrats are making the problem worse with their burdensome energy regulations that destroy jobs and drive up costs. Democrats in the White House are blocking common sense reforms that would allow for more targeted energy exploration here at home, which would lead to lower gas prices and additional job creation and greater security. 3 weeks ago, I had the privilege of sitting in the office of Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. He expressed great appreciation for America, but also ended by saying that he was greatly concerned that America was unwilling at this time to do what was necessary to make sure that we had an energy plan of independence from, as he called it, the earthquake zone of the Middle East. And I agree. So I'm joining with my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, their common sense and pro-growth, in proposing an alternative. I believe we should allow for more exploration in Alaska. So I co-sponsored H.R. 49, the American Energy Independence and Price Reduction Act. I believe we should pass an all-of-the-above energy plan. So that's why I'm becoming an original co-sponsor of H.R. 909, a roadmap to America's energy future. And the government should stop the painfully slow permitting process for drilling in the Gulf. So I joined with Representative Scalise and others of my colleagues in the House to urge the President to do just that. Mr. Speaker, the current energy policy is one of overregulation, and it's not working. We must work to change that now. I stand ready to work with my colleagues to create an energy policy that lowers energy prices and allows for more job creation. The people of my district and of this great country are demanding nothing less, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, thousands of people on Capitol Hill turned to NPR radio or the website to find out the latest developments on the horrific situation in Japan with the potential nuclear meltdown, with the fast-moving events in the Middle East. This is why the Pew survey revealed yesterday that while media across the board is declining, broadcast television news, newspapers, radio, that we are watching a renaissance as far as public broadcasting, particular NPR, which is increasing its audience, its revenues, and its reporting staff. But the health and vitality of NPR is not a reason to slash the financial support for public broadcasting. First and foremost, it is a minuscule part of the budget, less than 1/2 cent per day for each American. But more important, this is the type of infrastructure America needs right now. The public broadcasting support provides a unique service that is not available on commercial television. The education, culture, news, even the boring news is an area where there is no commercial market. That's why you will search 500 stations in vain on cable and satellite to find that type of programming that's available for news and for educating our children. More significant, the amount of money that flows from public broadcasting to NPR is a tiny fraction. Most of the public broadcasting support that is provided by Congress goes to local stations with particular emphasis on rural and small-town America. Taking an example of my home state of Oregon, where its award-winning Oregon Public Broadcasting, it costs 11 times more to broadcast to the far eastern reaches in Burns, Oregon, than it does in metropolitan Portland. And that is a pattern that is repeated coast to coast. Rural and small-town America relies more heavily on public broadcasting. It doesn't have the population base to ever provide it for itself. Slashing public broadcasting funding is not going to stop public broadcasting in New York or Washington, D.C., in Seattle or Los Angeles, or even Portland, Oregon. What it will do is make the programming less rich, and it will reduce the ability to provide those services in the outlying areas. Even the most recent flap about the media ambush of a former NPR fundraiser who produced an 11-minute video that appeared to be very damning as far as public broadcasting concerned. Well, it took NPR to do an in-depth study reviewing the entire 2-hour conversation captured on tape to find out that not the edited 11-minute version was misleading, trying to portray the point of view of the ambush journalism. This is the same guy who was caught by law enforcement officials trying to illegally bug the office of Senator Mary Landrieu in Louisiana. Found that in the course of 2 hours, it was very clear, reviewing the entire item, that it had been inappropriately edited to suggest that there was an acceptance, or thought it was amusing that there was somehow an attempt to impose Sharia law across the country. It ignored the fact that the NPR employee made it clear that there was a firewall between any contributions and influencing the editorial content. That's why NPR and PBS are the most trusted names in broadcasting, why 78% in a recent poll of Americans said they wanted public broadcasting support maintained or even increased, and indeed 2/3 of the Republicans wanted support maintained and increased. I hope my Republican colleagues will listen to the public and support this vital resource.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Nugent, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, it's with a heavy heart that I rise today to honor the life of Corporal Jonathan W. Taylor. 4 years to the day of his graduation from boot camp, Corporal Taylor died on February 22, 2011. At the age of 23, he bravely gave his life while conducting combat operations in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Growing up, Corporal Taylor always knew that he wanted to be a United States Marine. As a student at Lecanto High School, he was a member of the JROTC program. He was an active member with the Sea Cadet program out of Yankeetown. In October 2007, Corporal Taylor was deployed on his first combat tour on Operation Iraqi Freedom. Following that tour, he was deployed to support Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan 3 separate times. While his unit was not deployed during his second-to-last tour, Corporal Taylor bravely volunteered to go back to Afghanistan to continue the fight with his Marines. Corporal Taylor was laid to rest today with honors in Arlington National Cemetery. Over his career, his awards included the Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Medal, the NATO Medal for ISAF Afghanistan, and the Purple Heart. Now, beside his fellow brothers in uniforms, his parents, Mark and Debbie, have said they are proud to see their son off on his last and final deployment, his final tour of duty. Corporal Taylor courageously made the ultimate sacrifice for his Marines and his fellow Americans. As a country, as a nation, we owe our fallen heroes, their families, a debt that can never be repaid. It is our duty to always remember that these sacrifices were made on behalf of all Americans, that our brave young men and women in uniform are clear examples of what makes this nation so great. Today, I'm humbled to have the opportunity to introduce this House to a true American hero. Corporal Jonathan W. Taylor, God bless you, and God bless your service to this nation. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The proposed South Korea trade deal is the largest NAFTA-style trade agreement proposed in 15 years. Some people in Washington, including President Obama, support this agreement. Congress should not. Most importantly, the NAFTA-Korea deal will result in more job loss across countless communities in our country. The U.S. International Trade Commission studied this agreement and determined that it will be a net job loser for our country, just like the NAFTA deal was, just like the China deal was, just like all the failed non-reciprocal trade deals our nation has negotiated over the last 25 years. Yes, a handful of companies will come out ahead, and they have a lot of power in Washington. But as a whole, our country loses. We've heard a lot about deficits lately. This deal with the Koreans will only put us deeper in the hole. Why would Congress do this again to the American people and to the American economy? Last year, the United States ran up another $500 billion trade deficit with the world, and this past quarter, one of the largest in history. Now, both American and Korean estimates predict that this deal will only add to our deficit. These NAFTA-type trade deals translate into net job loss. Even the President doesn't claim that the deal will create new jobs. That's because it won't. In fact, it will cost jobs. America needs trade reciprocity. We need balance at a minimum, where our exports balance our imports and hopefully exceed our imports. We need to make goods in America again, not outsource more jobs. It's obvious to everyone we have a job crisis in America. Across our economy, the real rate of unemployment and underemployment is over 17%. This agreement, again, will negatively impact employment. In my district alone, the agreement threatens thousands of jobs. Why would America do this again to our people? More outsourcing, more job loss. My district is at the center of the automotive sector, and our companies supply manufacturers from Alabama to Detroit to New Jersey to California. This deal is bad for the entire U.S. automotive sector, the entire sector. In December, the administration negotiated with the Korean government a supplemental agreement on the automotive sector. And this side deal was supposed to ensure fairness for our auto companies, but it simply leaves too many unresolved concerns still on the table, and it doesn't provide reciprocity. There's no threshold measure that if we take 500,000 Korean cars, which we already do, and they only take 6,000 of ours, which is what's going on right now, that they have any requirement at all to actually increase imports. We ought to fix what's wrong with the existing system rather than trade away more of our substance. There's also a strange logic that we somehow leveled the playing field by allowing the South Korean government to subject our cars to additional regulations within 4 years. And there is no threshold measure that we actually are balancing the huge trade deficit we already have with that nation. There's another loophole. The cars don't really have to be made in South Korea. Nearly two-thirds of the actual content can come from, guess where, Communist China and other countries that are relentlessly engaged in predatory and illegal trading practices. The automotive sector isn't the only industry that is at risk. Multiple sectors will be impacted, including textiles, electronics, and metal products. And that's just in manufacturing. Beef producers better pay attention because they're going to lose under this deal as well. I look forward to the day when this president, or any president, submits a trade agreement that will actually create new employment opportunities net across our country. We surely need the jobs. Yes, trade can help fuel economic growth, but we need agreements that yield reciprocity and put America on a level trade playing field. NAFTA-styled Korean free trade agreements simply doesn't meet that test. This deal is over 400 pages long, and that's without the annexes to the agreement. The American people should read it, and so should Congress. America needs jobs here at home, not more job outsourcing, and surely not more trade deficits. We need reciprocity, and it will be the first time in a quarter century. That should be our target, not more job loss in America. Mr. Speaker, I yield back my remaining time.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Sanchez, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the Honorable Joseph Esquivel for his 39 years of public service to the people of Lakewood, California. Joe began his service to Lakewood as a member of the Lakewood Recreation and Community Services Commission in 1972, and in 1990 he began the first of his 5 terms on the Lakewood City Council. After 21 productive years of service on the council, Joe is retiring from public service to spend more quality time with his family. Joe and his wife Pat have called Lakewood home since 1963, raising 3 wonderful children and in the process becoming proud grandparents and great-grandparents. As an active leader in his community, Joe has a hand in the founding of many local organizations such as the Lakewood Youth Hall of Fame. Joe continues to be a member of the Hall of Fame Board of Electors, which is charged with recognizing Lakewood's young high school and collegiate standout athletes. Throughout his time on the City Council as mayor, Joe made it his priority to ensure that Lakewood remains safe, family-friendly, and a thriving community. Joe was instrumental in bringing together the resources needed to make the Lakewood state-of-the-art sheriff's station a reality, and was integral to developing several crime prevention programs that have made our community safer. Over the past 2 decades, Joe has worked tirelessly to make certain Lakewood operates on firm financial footing and never outside of its fiscal means. While the struggling economy has impacted many cities throughout Southern California, Lakewood has managed to maintain funding for all city services and capital improvement projects. In addition, Lakewood has managed to be a leading destination for businesses and new business development. Joe's involvement in public service reaches far beyond the confines of the city's council chamber. Joe is a dedicated member of Lakewood's Rotary Club, having served for many years as the coordinator of the Rotary Club's annual Project Shepherd Holiday Assistance Program for families in need. Under his leadership, Project Shepherd aided hundreds of families each year with the help of volunteers of all ages from Lakewood schools, churches, and youth organizations. He was named Rotarian of the Year in 1995. One of his joys as a Lakewood resident was serving as a volunteer coach of 8- and 9-year-old youngsters in basketball and football at Boulevard Park. He received the Mayor's Award for 11 seasons of volunteer coaching. He has held various leadership positions, including President of the California Contract Cities Association, President of the Greater Los Angeles County Vector Control District, and President of the Private Industry Council of Southeast Los Angeles County. Joe sits on the Lakewood Regional Medical Center and Lakewood Weingart Family YMCA Board of Directors. As a Navy veteran, Joe has been a proud member of the American Legion Post 496 for the past 19 years. From one public servant to another, I praise Mayor Joseph Esquivel for his service and dedication to the City of Lakewood and to the community. Lakewood would not be the community it is today without him. I want to thank him for his years of service and wish him the best of luck as he moves forward in new endeavors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington, Mr. McDermott, for 5 minutes. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, 4 days ago, a huge earthquake and tsunami hit Japan. I was sort of surprised last night when we came in and there was no resolution recognizing the problems of the Japanese people and the terror and the difficulties they are dealing with at this time. So I want to come today to rise in support of them as they cope with this tremendous tragedy and the challenges that both the earthquake and the tsunami have created for them. For the last 10 years or so, I've been the chair of the Japanese-American exchange between the Diet and the Congress, and I've gotten to know many Japanese members of the Diet very well. I was a member of this commission some years ago when Kobe had a huge earthquake and devastation that took $100 billion to recover from. So I was sort of brought up short by what happened when I saw it on television and thought of my friends, and I immediately started trying to call them. I couldn't find them. I only this morning got in touch with a friend of mine named Matsuda-san. Matsuda and I have been good friends for a long time. In fact, I've been to his home a very few miles from Sendai City, where the earthquake, the center of this whole event was. He's well, his family is well, and he said his friends are also safe, and his house is still standing. So for many people, they've escaped the terror of this, but there are thousands and thousands of people who are struggling with this, and the Japanese people have shown a resilience which is amazing. When the government said there's going to be rolling blackouts in Tokyo, we need to conserve electricity, the Japanese conserved electricity so quickly that they didn't have the rolling blackouts. That's how they came together in the interest of the common good in Japan. Now, Washington State, where I come from, has the third largest Japanese population in the United States. Only California and Hawaii have more. As I said, we have a sister city with Kobe. And when that hit, there was shock for everyone in Seattle because we also live on the ring of fire around the Pacific Ocean that we've seen strike so recently, not only in Japan, but in New Zealand. Sometimes you can't believe it. You live in a place like that. You know it can happen anytime, but you still go on with your life, sort of denying that it's real. After the Japanese earthquake in Kobe some years ago, there was a lot of criticism of the government. You didn't plan enough. Well, they've been planning for this for the last 10 years, but nobody can plan for an 8.9 Richter scale earthquake. That's just too much. And I think that it is important to remember the Japanese are not just good allies. They're good friends. To many of us, they are brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers. Some of them are among my very best friends. This tragedy, as it continues to unfold, it's just to think of what life is like for those people who are alive and under the rubble, or the homeless. Imagine you have a life, it's a nice life, you're working, you're going to school, your kids are growing up, and suddenly you have no food, no heat, no water, and you're in the freezing cold. Now, the United States has responded. We have had military bases in Japan for a long time. Luckily, they were close by, so they could immediately move some of the aircraft carriers and other ships in to deliver relief aid. And it is at that time when you realize, in fact, their government has actually realized, that fighting about some of the things politically they fight about are not so important. What's really important is the basics of life being provided to everyone in the country. This is a national disaster that has been complicated by another factor that we have to consider in the United States, and that's the whole question of nuclear power and what happens to nuclear power plants. We have nuclear power plants in this country that are sitting near earthquake zones, so this is not something that is something we can say, well, that's over there in Japan, that's 9,000 miles and 12 hours away. That is, in fact, very near to us here in this country. For the Japanese, the threat of nuclear contamination, of radiation, is a special horror because they suffered in Hiroshima and Nagasaki the only use of nuclear weapons and the fallout that followed that. Today, millions of Japanese are still trying to absorb what they are seeing and valiantly fighting to control the damage. Our thoughts and prayers go to the Japanese people. I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Spear, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to discuss an epidemic that is flying too far under the radar: the bullying of children with special needs. Bullying has gotten a fair amount of attention in recent years. Our nation was shocked by the story of Tyler Clementi, a gay Rutgers student who jumped off the George Washington Bridge after being bullied by his peers. Earlier this month, Dateline NBC ran a special called, quote, "My Kid Would Never Bully," unquote. In it, hidden cameras were used so parents could watch their children react to several different bullying situations set up by Dateline. The results were not great. Last week, the President and First Lady held a White House conference on bullying. What we haven't focused on is who gets bullied the most. And you might be surprised by this. It's children with special needs. In fact, 2 times as many children with special needs are taunted every day in schools as children who we, quote, say are normal. Tomorrow, I will be co-hosting a briefing with Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers, herself a parent of a special needs child, to discuss the heartbreaking issue. We will be joined by Lauren Potter, an actress on the hit show Glee, who has Down syndrome and who will share her personal stories as well. We will be highlighting a report by AbilityPath.org, Best Buddies and the Special Olympics. This report shines a bright light on this epidemic. Here in Congress, it seems there are as many reports as minutes in the day, but too often they end up collecting dust instead of inspiring action. In this case, we cannot allow that to happen. Bullying and harassment fosters a climate of fear and disrespect that can seriously impair the physical and psychological health of its victims and create conditions that negatively affect their learning. For special needs children who already face tremendous challenges, adding this extra burden is simply unacceptable. Those with special needs are more likely to be targets, either because their differences single them out in the classroom or because they have difficulty in communicating and reading social cues. Let me share with you a story from the report. These are the words of a mother of an 11-year-old girl with Down syndrome. My daughter is wonderful, adorable, sweet child with Down syndrome. The bullying she encountered started in elementary school and has followed her through middle school. Everyone makes a big deal about their children being bullied at school, and it is a big deal. However, it's always the normal children that you hear about. Who stands up for the children who are like my daughter? It was this sense of helplessness that led James Jones, whose daughter suffers from cerebral palsy, to confront her bullies on a Florida school bus in 2008. The video was unforgettable and shocking. The numbers are just as disturbing. A study in the British Journal of Learning Support found that 60% of students with special needs reported being bullied, compared to 25% of the general student population. Researchers have discovered that students with disabilities were more worried about school safety and being injured or harassed by other peers compared to students without a disability. The National Autistic Society reports that 40% of children with autism and 60% of those with Asperger's syndrome have experienced bullying. It's time for Congress to stand up and to speak up for these children and their families. In the coming weeks, I will be introducing legislation to tackle the issue head-on. Under this legislation, schools that receive federal funds will be required to report the number of incidents of bullying and whether the victims have special needs. In addition, federal funds used for bullying programs will be required to include content that specifically addresses the bullying of those with special needs. I hope we can begin a national conversation to ensure this epidemic goes silent no more. I yield back.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.